I think we're streaming live now. Good morning. Hello, I'm John from Portuguese.
Hello, John. How are you?
Hello, David.
Breakfast Saturday with John.
Yeah, Saturdays with David. The where we do tomorrow tonight on Saturday morning because David goes to bed 7:30 p.m. Is it, David?
No. You've changed that all the
Have
time. Isn't it? I mean, it used to become a running joke. I go to bed about 9-ish.
9 p.m. Yeah.
Yeah.
You make sure it's just before the late, so you know you can.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, the only time I ever watch the Late Show, which I don't, is anything you send me to comment on. I don't actually watch television more, really.
Did you see Mary Robinson then last night? You didn't?
No, I did not. No.
She was on the Late. Could I play a small clip of it, do you think?
Sure.
We touched on it last week, Mary Robinson and her trip to Dubai. Have you any further thoughts on it?
Well, I mean, Mrs. Robinson is a very sincere human being, and if she says she was misled, I'm trying to believe her.
Right.
She's not a person noted for telling untruths. I mean, it's been a defining hallmark of her entire career, really. She's a person who calls things as she sees things. And so if there was one person in Irish public life over a number of years who, whatever her failures and weaknesses, one can believe at least she calls things as she sees things, and to some degree has avoided compromise. You know, it's her. But having said that, once you deal with the devil, you know, once you become part of the international circus, then you are in a way like a mannequin or a marionette that they manipulate you. That is the danger of associating with very powerful and very wealthy people.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, David, she hasn't been really part of Irish public life for about 25 years. I mean, she's an international figure now, a globalist, part of the elders. She's chair of this group, the elders.
Yes, no, I know that. I mean, I think that's, well, whatever about the constituents of it, the people who are part of it. Nonetheless, I do think, a bit like Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials, there is a need for monastic elitists who are broad-minded, civilized, and interdisciplinary to provide a corrective to some of the rather narrow, specialized, dogmatic thought processes we see in evidence today. Whether an elders group should be a constituent of retired politicians and diplomats is a completely, or world leaders, is a different consideration. John Berger, the great intellectual, who's still alive miraculously, has spoken eloquently about the need for interdisciplinary thought and interdisciplinary range of observations confronting some of the problems we face with. And so her elders idea, if it gets the right people in the room, is a very good idea. But the question is, are they the right people?
This is very brief from last night.
Oh, it's been awful. Yeah, it's been deeply hurtful, and I find,
just to say that what's deeply hurtful is presumably the press commentary. I'll just get back to that.
Oh, it's been awful. Yeah, it's been deeply hurtful, and I find, you know, I'm not trying to excuse, but you know, it has been very tough. Yes.
In what sense?
Oh, in every sense. You know, I care about my reputation. You know, I care about my integrity. I care about, mind you, I find I'm continuing to do all my work, and it doesn't seem to, impact on people that I'm working with in all the aspects that I'm working.
Do you feel that your legacy is slightly under fire?
I do, yeah. And you know, that's hurtful. But actually, to tell you the truth, I'm coming on the show, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to tell the full story, because I want now the focus to be where it should be, which is on Latifa and her sister.
I wonder, has I was just wondering, has the Mayo Ballina accent increased over time? It seems like her voice has become more countrified when you were just saying she's such an international figure. But I mean, she's obviously right to be protective of the enormous achievements and contributions she's made to Irish public life, and to be undermined by something like this, and for it to be blown out of proportion. But the point still resides that, of course, once you're in the ballpark, once you're in the territory she's in, and you're associating with very powerful people, they often use you for their own ends, and you are misled.
Just curious, before we move down, we will go to that very important point. Do you think you made a gross error of judgment, Mary, or do you think you were so duped that it was beyond your control?
I made a mistake.
Can I? I mean, you don't want a Paxman. It's the Late Late Show, but that is the softest ball question to anyone you're ever going to likely to hear.
I let my heart lead my head. I went to help a friend.
It's kind of scripted almost, it seems.
I was naive. I should have been more alert.
David, are you very familiar with the... Sorry, David, are you familiar with the ins and outs of this story?
Yeah, to a point, yes.
Well, David, you see that, I think you're somewhat limited in your knowledge of the actual mechanics of what happened, and the fact that she was given an ample opportunity to kind of say all this 2 years ago, but she still went by what the Maktoum people were saying about Princess Latifah.
Well, look,
she compounded the kidnap situation, really. And this is all delayed about 2 years later.
It doesn't detract from my fundamental point. Well, the delay and the lapse in an apology is not correct, but it doesn't detract from my fundamental point as to whether and to what extent she is a mannequin or someone who is manipulated. I mean, unless she's changed radically from my brief acquaintance with her, I would have thought she is a person of principle and integrity. Now, having said that, I mean, Ryan Turbiddy is not, a journalist of any probing stature, and the questions were light, and it does seem like they elicited a kind of scripted response. I mean, if you ever see Jeremy Paxman, who'd reduce people to absolute tears, or Robin Day, where they would walk out of the studio after a grilling from him. And that level of Rottweiler-like interrogation is badly needed in the culture at the moment, and sadly absent in Ireland at all, it's fact.
Well, we had, you were talking about Drew Harris being on
that was like an infomercial for the Guards, Drew.
Yeah. But this also, I'll just play a little bit more, because
having interviewed you and met you many, many times, the last word I would have used to describe you as naive. And
it's quite a good point, that, actually.
Quite shocked to hear you describe yourself.
Well, that's all I can say. And that's hurtful to me when I realize, that I made a big mistake. I've made mistakes before. That's the biggest one, I hope.
Well, look, I think we've done. She's a very decent, sincere person, in my estimation. And she is kind of guileless, I suspect, as well. Yeah, she's lived in a kind of world of her own. By which I mean the trajectory up is kind of inconceivable for people, really. So I would have thought, now, obviously, the failure to apologize earlier, the way she may have indirectly compounded the problem, but enough's enough. Her legacy is not really tainted. She has been a force of nothing but good in Irish life for many years.
Well, I wasn't really concerned about her legacy. I was more concerned about your woman's safety.
No, that is. Well, I mean, these are separate questions.
Yeah, but it's almost like, well, they are, but they're also relevant questions.
But how can she do anything about
it? Who cares how she feels really at this stage? I mean, it's a grotesque error, but it's worse than that because of her previous roles. And, what was her relationship with this family? Did they fund her climate foundation? Were they more involved? Was she more involved with the Dubai rulers than she's letting on, as she's saying? I mean, why would you go and be part of that pure exercise. If it was just an old friend, Princess Haya, I knew her back at the Dublin Horse Show.
I mean, I don't know. You say
okay. Sorry,
but hold on. Let's put it this way.
I know she's a big liberal hero and everything.
Well, hold on. I'll say something sharp then. Dynamite, of course, founded the Nobel Prize. Funding is needed for climate change. I don't know how or what the relationship structure is, but I stand by the fact that if you're in the business of trying to affect consciousness raising global change the way she is, then you might have to dance with the devil occasionally. I don't think, and it is a separate question about the awful kidnapping of the daughter, but that is a question that needs to be resolved. Not
also she's
accountability of those people.
She's Chancellor of Trinity, and the Mactoum Cultural Institute or whatever was set up there. Again, more of this Dubai money, more, and she was asked about it. She said she didn't know that.
I know not.
Okay,
as much as I possibly can about this.
Yeah.
But I don't know anything further, so I'm not going to.
I know. And I think that period, that early 90s period, is a bit like Big Jack's army. You know, the Mary Robinson factor is so strong in the memory that nothing really will kind of dent it.
Well, there's not just that. There's also her initiatives in climate change. I mean, she's been a pathfinder as much as David Attenborough or more recently Greta Thunberg in that respect.
Well, also she's been naive on that front. She described people who she described them as climate change deniers. She's described them as evil. She said they're evil, these people.
Yeah, I mean, I say
just people who disagree with her, David.
I've said
similar. David, this is you would say similar. Well, very judicious of both of you.
I'm not so sure I would. But to give an airing to people who outright deny there is no such thing as climate change, well, seems to me to be dangerous at one level.
These people who disagree with you, they're not evil.
I didn't use that expression, but I just.
But that's her expression. That's what Mary.
Glaciers are falling apart. The science would indicate that the agro industry is destroying.
I know, David, but we're talking about.
Well, I mean, one shouldn't divide the world into Manichaean terms between good and evil.
Well, she is. So let's really call out evil when we see it. Evil is kidnapping your daughter, keeping her for 2 years.
Yes, but
calling in favors to
well, I mean,
that she's alive.
I mean,
that's evil. That's what I regard as evil.
Well,
I think disagreeing with you on climate change is not.
Well, no. But you're attributing a level of responsibility to her for that act, which she doesn't have.
Well, I'm not. I'm simply saying that she's.
Well, whoever did kidnapping in that way is, of course, slavery and evil, yes, and criminal, but on account.
Hey, David, sorry, I don't want to. I don't have a row.
Yeah, well.
So, the Irish Independent brought this horrific murder sparked by a row of a farm.
I read this story, and what it evoked in me, I think, is I was about to represent some farmers in Ireland, and there was a debt receivership situation. And a week beforehand, someone committed suicide. And so one of the farmers, young children, and a note. And one has to see how, now the context here is different a little bit, but it is a land dispute. But one has to see how the rural community and the farmers and the receiverships and bankruptcies and foreclosures are destroying a lot of the texture of Irish life. And these sort of incidences, which were not frequent, are becoming more and more frequent. Now, it is a different context in this situation, but there is no doubt that the rural community and the farmlands are suffering greatly as a result of the austerity model. And this is another emanation of that in a different context. Now, it is a internecine domestic dispute. The family had a troubled history, it is said, but one doesn't know what really is going on there. That's the point.
Fine Gael ministers to turn down pay increase. They were given a pay increase, bringing them to 100 grand last week, I think.
Well, it's not big of them, you know. I mean, I'm not sure they're entitled to any pay, really.
Well, are they even entitled to turn it down? I mean, it's part of the, you know what I mean? It's
a kind of exercise of tokenism, really.
Purchasing.
They get paid more than enough for what they do, or do not do, in fact.
The Irish Times weekend, again, the story, I just wanted two fingers to Dublin, Johnny Ronan's Towers, Frank MacDonald. I'm not sure if you're aware that Johnny Ronan is trying to build Ireland's highest building in the Docklands, but the planning people won't let him, but he continues to keep on. And now he's got not just one tower, but two towers. So.
Oh, God. Yeah. Well, okay. we need, I've written about this, speaking of the environment, we need, really what we need to do is paint our houses blue and grey, small habitable spaces, small terraced houses for people. And we don't need the urban landscape ruined by corporate skyscraper monstrosities, which would be horrible to work in anyway. I mean, that is my view. I mean, the model of living and the model of architecture that the Nordic countries and the Dutch have, of largely of small spaces, of small dwellings, of small offices, is what we should be going to. I think these things are like a blot on the landscape, and they become white elephants over time.
Right. Again, the murder, suicide
thing.
It's
everywhere, isn't it? Yeah.
Farm around.
It's horrible. I should have stressed the awfulness of the deaths in question, and my heart goes out to the family. But of course, part of it, I think, is a reflection at one level of the overall distress that people in rural Ireland and the farming community.
We're of a similar mind about the COVID response, David. I think there's a story in the Examiner about please avoid meeting at school gates.
I mean, it's just fucking ridiculous. Please breathe with our permission. You can walk with our permission. Perhaps you can, if you fart, that will now be a way of communicable transmission of the disease. I mean, I hate to put it in those slightly, but it is becoming absolutely ludicrous.
Yeah,
this kind of zero COVID thing that's being peddled as well.
Yeah.
By the scientists, and indeed by Mr. David Langwallner, is, people's livelihoods will be destroyed.
Yeah.
Their liberties will be destroyed. A dehumanization process is going to take place. And there was a report in one of the British papers about how the figures for deaths don't disclose, or COVID deaths are attributed to people who are dying for other reasons.
Actually, I wanted to call that up.
We're coming up in a second, but the point is that we're going to, assumption says as well, we're going to go into a situation where there are going to be reoccurrences of pandemics and plagues and the variants and so on. Unfortunately, we've disrupted Gaia so much back to the environment again that is, and the idea that we can have a complete cleansing, a cutting off of people. Well, and McWilliams is saying, well, don't worry, everything will be good and there'll be more money. Money for whom? Certainly not money for the ordinary people if they're being shut out of their livelihoods, or the farmers are being foreclosed, or they're not allowed to socialize, and the pub industry is gone. I mean, this, and also, the scientific mathematical intelligence, as Hannah Arendt would argue, is a disaster if it doesn't have a moral compass. Jürgen Habermas, the great German intellectual, still alive, probably the world's greatest intellectual, in his critique of German society, has always said it is not enough just to have technical solutions or technocratic or economist solutions or scientific solutions. One has got to look at the human factor and the moral question, which is technical solutions, yes, but mitigated and controlled by moral outcomes. You can't put people in permanent lockdown.
No, David, so this is the UK Daily Mail. What is the truth about COVID deaths? Grieving families last night said deaths have been wrongly certified as COVID-19, demanding an inquiry. Top medical experts and MPs also insisted they were certain that too many fatalities will be blamed on the virus. One funeral director said it was a national scandal. The claims are part of a Daily Mail investigation that raises serious questions over the spiraling death toll. I hate to say it, and I literally said it like our first thing back in last March. I said that if they're counting the death, of course you're going to get loads of deaths if they're just throwing in everything. Like, you're going to suicide in Spain. I got it was.
Well, I mean, look, it's taking a lot of people's coping skill. If you're working and I'm privileged to be working and at a high level and writing at a reasonably high level, and I'm privileged to be very mentally active and still reasonably physically active in the walking orienteering sense of the term. Now, if people are distressed, they're not allowed to be productive, then there will be both a mental and physical deterioration. And the deaths may not be COVID related. They might be heart attacks or strokes or the development of cancer because of the stress and because of lifestyle stressors built onto the stress, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And this is right back to the point of you can't really lock people down permanently, which scientists in Dublin and Mac Williams seem to suggest is some sort of good idea.
But their fear, David, is based on these figures, which seem to be very hooky. I mean, they don't seem to be the right figures. They're fudged. Why give me one decent reason why they would put down a car crash victim as COVID, even though it's clearly patently the person died.
I mean, unless the Daily Mail investigation unearthed certain things, I would have said that incompetence and chaos that must be the case at given peaks in time in the hospital.
You don't think that they've been told to attribute deaths to bring up the numbers?
It's speculative. I don't know. I don't think so. I wouldn't. Primarily,
Can you think of a reason other than that, though? Apprentice exclusive, My Sugar Daddy Shane.
I don't know what that is.
Well,
sorry.
You're going to address that later, aren't you?
No.
The Irish Field. You're not a horse.
No. Never really. I mean, I think I bet on Red Robin the National, and many years ago. I was the most bet I've ever taken in my entire life. I think I've been to the races about 4 or 5 times.
Okay. Yeah. Alex Salmond, you're quite familiar with this story, aren't you?
Well, I know a lot about the inner workings of Glasgow. A lot of my student career was debating in the Glasgow Union, which is a merciless place.
Right.
There is no ground ceded. I tell a great story. I remember when I won the semi-final of the International Observer Mace with a colleague from Dublin, and very graciously the Glaswegians allowed us to win instead of a Glasgow theme. And then they invited us to this fabulous banquet. And they said, now, congratulations on getting through to the final. We just want to serenade you. And then they broke into, for about 20 minutes, do you want a chicken supper, Fenians? I can't repeat the rest of it. So it is a rough sort of place.
It's a controversial choice.
But in the sense of, hyper articulate, very verbally aggressive people, and I'd imagine the rough and tumble of Scottish politics is a bit of a.
Well, can you explain that? Can you tell it?
I think what Sam seems to be suggesting in a very detailed series of responses is that those rape allegations that he was faced with were contrived, fabricated, or at least promoted by his political enemies, especially Sturgeon, who was his successor as leader of the SNP. Now, it was a very convincing performance, in my view, by him. He is a tremendous grasp of detail, and I'm inclined to accept much of what he says.
But then it's extraordinary, isn't it?
That's credible, but it is absolutely extraordinary. But it has become an awful phenomenon of our age that the sex allegation is a way of destroying a political opponent. I'm not saying it is necessarily the case in this case, but it has become an awful feature of our age, and why anyone would want to get involved in politics when your entire life can be destroyed. And so it's an enormous ordeal.
Apart from their, he's a political rival of hers, but apart from that, why would you think they were so keen to get him out and bring her in?
Well,
was he more pro Brexit? I mean, was he less EU than favourable than her?
Well, he is not. He's a polarizing figure.
Yeah.
He's a man inclined to speak his own mind and let the chips fall.
Yeah.
That kind of old style politician. I mean, there was a good example in the British Labour Party of John Prescott. That kind of old style politician, rough and parliamentary, say what I say,
macho,
proud, that kind of thing is not suitable to the more softy, feely, touchy, feely type presentational skills required today. So maybe I don't know the ins and outs. But we would have thought that there was a sense, and nor, if there's any substance in what he is saying, nor is there any justification for the methodology used, if that's what it was.
Right. It's dirty.
It's really dirty. But having said that, maybe they just felt he was too much of an old-style dinosaur political fossil. Unlike all political careers end in failure, except perhaps Churchill's.
Well, yeah, that was Enoch Palestine, wasn't it?
I can't remember who said that, but the point about the matter is all political careers do end in failure, and just they felt he was a dinosaur.
Yeah. The Guardian, Saudi Crown Prince approved Khashoggi murder, US report. First-time buyers get boosts for new loans.
He looks rather haggard, doesn't he? He looks like he looks like he's been through a meat grinder.
Well, if what he's saying is true,
I mean, he looks wan and I've certainly avoided politics my entire life. Who'd want to get involved?
Well, who would? Look at that. I mean,
he looks deathly almost, actually.
Yeah. Jet Express, don't wreck it now. COVID battle not won. It's too early to relax. You see, David, you were beginning to relax, weren't you?
I think you're being a little cheeky. I mean,
I know.
I risk my life by going to court, you might say, every day, and I was in court yesterday, physically in person, not remotely.
No, I think you're playing blind.
I mean, if you live in a perpetual state, I'm in Sniper's Alley at this stage anyway, and there are any multiplicity of causes that could get me to keel over, and COVID's only one of them. which isn't to say I don't take adequate precautions. But the suggestion that, I mean, it's a question of nuance and balance. Yeah? We have to work, we have to earn a livelihood. Yes, there is a pandemic. How overstated it is assumption. Myself separately argue, it is not the Black Plague. It is not the flu at the end of the First World War. It is not. Are the responses to it disproportionate? In my view, yes, totally. Is it a threat to human rights? Yes, it's a worldwide threat, creating what Sumption argues is a kind of Chinese capitalism, or a return, oddly enough, like Hayek, to a return to serfdom. But of course, autonomy, authenticity, independence of action is to work within this environment as much as one can, whilst trying to be aware of what are cognizable and obvious risks, but risks that may be overstated. But nonetheless, we are in this situation. I mean, the fact of the matter is, to function and survive, the worst thing, I think, is to be not productive.
Yeah. Difficult unless, you can create, like you have. I mean, you can, but you're like, you will appear at some Reading Crown Court or something, but from your kitchen, it's extraordinary, really, isn't it?
Yes, yesterday I trekked all the way up to a magistrate's court. And I mean, it is there are very significant control mechanisms. Now, I wrote something about this, which hasn't been published. I mean, I did a Crown Court trial where we were all behind plexiglasses.
Yeah, wow.
And all the jurors were kept behind plexiglasses, and you have to go through. Obviously, you have to go through security as you go in, but the security checks are a bit like airport checks. Now you have to put your hands up like this. Everything is to be taken out. You are asked questions about whether you have COVID. The mask rule is that you wear the mask in the public corridor, but not necessarily in the courtroom, depending on a given court. But the point is, sometimes, your behavioral pattern changes. You rush out the door of the court to chat to the client. You've got to rein back and put on the mask before you go out. Right. And then when you meet the client, you've got to be distanced from the client. And
David, you have a murder trial at the Bailey, but at the Old Bailey, but you were saying that.
No, I've never done a murder trial in the Bailey at all. I've done a sex case in the Bailey. Right. But I have other cases. Well, I'm not talking about the details. I'm not a murder.
No. But you were saying that they have to do.
The case I did behind the plexiglass was a 3-week case, a very serious case, equivalent seriousness. But my point was, I was behind a plexiglass. My opponent, distance, was behind a plexiglass. The jurors were all not just behind a general plexiglass, they were all in little plexiglass cabinets. And the thing that hasn't been published, I said, I felt like, and the judge came to a similar reflection. We all felt like we were in that film about the Eichmann trial.
Yeah,
Shell is in a glass booth. Yeah. We're all in glass booths. And I tell a joke as I got probably more by repetition as I go into a court now, and the joke is if I were to go into a courtroom a year and a half ago and say to the security in the courtroom as you go in, by the way, can I take my mask from my bag? Or I was to go in wearing a mask.
Yeah. They'd have jumped on you.
And I was talking to a police officer, and he said, "Yeah, and look at banks now." I mean, so we have to understand, in general terms, we're living in a totally altered universe, and that whether we like it or not, restrictions are imposed upon us. Yeah. Now, that does not mean blind conformity or obedience, which is very.
David, do you wear your mask? Like when you went to the magistrate's court, did you wear your mask on the journey on the train?
Well, on the train, yes.
Okay.
Because if you don't wear your mask on the train,
They'll kick you off.
yeah, and you have to. The minute you go into the station, you have to wear your mask. You can walk the streets.
Do you walk the streets without a mask?
Well, when I get out of the train station on the way to the court, I need to breathe a little bit.
Yes. But do you fully remove it, or do you just do?
Yeah, I kind of end up a bit like some sort of gaucho South American person, because I put the mask down.
Yeah.
So that I can, because it's supposed to go up above
here.
Yeah,
like a toothache or something. Like it's kind of.
Yeah, and then sometimes when I'm going into the court, I'm reminded to put it back up again.
Right, but this is not a statement. You're not sort of protesting, essentially, are you? You're not kind of like.
I'm just trying to get some spazieren gehen. I'm just trying to get some air into my system, some exercise, and as long as you are distant from people and you walk, which is another unfortunate feature of our present existences, that people are a bit like square dancing against each other and keeping,
David, just want to briefly, your column this week or yesterday is it's all Greek tonight. Do you want to just?
I must say it's got a terrific reception. I've never had quite a uniformly positive reception, which is.
It shows that most people really didn't get it. No.
Yeah, I mean, no. I think people like Greece, and there are lots of positive and erudite things in it. I must say one comment which I think is important. I think you did a very good copy edit job on it.
Not at all. No.
Because, I mean, my copy is always a nightmare to deal with, and there was a noticeable comment of how well copy edited was. So I know you took a lot of care in copying edited. I'd like to say something about my friend Leonidas Paides.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Now, can I just explain who this chap is?
Yeah.
Like 5 years ago, you took on a case with the Innocent Project, which you co-founded.
Project structure, yeah.
And to help you on the case, there was a chap.
No, the other way around. The lawyer in Athens was Leonidas Paides, and the Innocence Project went over in a purely subordinate way to assist him. But we went over 2 or 3 times, and there's a documentary about him, and he's a superhuman being, and he's fearless. Actually, he's like a lion. He's a fearless, expressive advocate, and a charming, personable human being. And even though he's a member of the Greek establishment, he is still a man who prides himself, I think, on his independence of thought and independence of action. And he's suffering financially and in all sorts of ways, or was. And we arranged subsequently that he came to an Innocence Project conference. And I think it was some degree of relief for him in a way, but he is, I wouldn't quite say he's a personal hero of mine, but I mean, I think he represents some of the best qualities I've seen in criminal defense people. I think he's a very warm man. The other thing is the warmth, the warmth and loveliness of Greece. I mean, there's stories that I could have told I didn't, but one of the funniest things, in the depths of winter, we're in the Greek Supreme Court, and he's asked me to come to the Greek Supreme Court, and I go to the wrong building. And eventually I get to the Supreme Court, and you go into the Greek Supreme Court in the depths of winter. You walk in the door, there's no security really. And then, where's the Supreme Court? It's upstairs. So you go upstairs, you're just walking up the stairs, and you look in the door, and my tendency is to just stand back a little bit. And there are about 100 in the room, and they're all, dress codes. They're all in knickerbockers or in duffel coats, because the Greeks don't like the winter. And there's a whole cacophony of advocacy going on. And I'm going, hold on a second, where do I sit? how do I go into the court? Lady just goes, come in here, there, and you sit there, and then there are 14 or 12 judges in front of you. But it was that aspect of trust, of informality, of relaxed decency that I identify, hopefully, in that article.
Yeah, it's not available on Zoom, is it? You know, that conviviality, that level of intimacy, and
no, and you know, I wanted to write it for a long while because and it inspired a lot of things, and he's a very cultured and urbane man as well. He prompted me, I think I may have prompted myself as well, to go and see Katsanakis, the great Greek writer's grave, and I went to his museum. It was a long trek. And, you know, Crete and Athens are repositories of culture and democracy. And it is, of course, the crucible of democracy and arguably the crucible of civilization. You're very conscious of it when you're there. And all of those values are under massive siege and threat. Which prompted the article.
Yeah, it makes, actually, what you just said there, it sort of makes the humiliation they received at the hands of Christine Lagarde, etc., so humiliating, doesn't it? I mean,
well, yeah, and it's a kind of double form of humiliation in a way, because the suggestion is, of course, they are not fiscally prudent. Well, if you're bailing out Goldman Sachs and the banks, you're not fiscally prudent. In fact, and austerity as an economic model does not work. And then, of course, Goldman Sachs came in to do a salvage operation, which exacerbated the entire problem. I mean, there is a sense also, I think, of inappropriate racism redolent in technocrats. It is almost if they are in technical bureaucratic positions, they feel in some sense that they're better than. You know, I'd like Christian Lagarde to go head to head and debate with Leonidas Paidas. There would only be one outcome. He would wipe the floor with her.
Yeah. Can I just quote a piece from your article? Our brave new world of the internet is incubating a dangerously compliant and accepting population reflected in the far right, or indeed soporific left's obsession with marginal issues. Democratic liberals persuaded to consent to their own demise.
No, the issues affecting the world today are, back to Mrs. Robinson, the environmental collapse, inequality, pervasive widening inequality, housing, healthcare rights, the breakdown of moderation and multiculturalism, the breakdown of tolerance. Those are the issues. And the need to recapture, back to Jürgen Habermas, the need, or indeed Hannah Arendt, the need to recapture the public sphere, which Greece has. You know, in the article, I reference going to Pericles' first democratic chamber, which is in the Agora, which is free and you can walk around it. And we're in the marketization of human activity and the dogmatism that market solutions work and that austerity works, which it doesn't. And the dogmatism also that this total lockdown will create wealth, but for whom? Not for ordinary people,
no.
Most middle-class people, is just dogmatism. And the shrillness with which it is enforced, and Lagarde's remark to the Greeks is like that. We're the appropriate adults.
Yeah.
It's like an international nanny state, and
desperately cruel to say that to Greek people. You know, of all people.
Well, yes, I mean
we're the adults.
Well, yeah, but if you're the adults, you didn't invent democracy, nor were you responsible for Socrates or Plato, nor were you responsible for Nikos Katsanakis or and so. If there is, this is in a sense, it is a reflection of the breakage of the European consensus when you are making remarks that are not communautaire, to use the old-fashioned expression, and not respecting of the cultural diversity of the tradition. And so if it is a hegemonic bloc, it is a hegemonic bloc run, which is, of course, explains Brexit in a way, a hegemonic bloc run by technocratic bureaucrats who see in a tunnel vision sort of way only one way of doing things. And
David, well, it's an excellent piece. It'll have you reaching for the dictionary. It had me reaching for the dictionary. David, thanks a lot for joining us this morning. Hopefully you'll join us next week, and you have a couple of columns coming up as well on Tuesday and Friday. Thank you very much.